Hello and welcome to this special webinar on searching for chemical reaction information in Reaxys. Today we have a very special guest speaker and I will be asking him a number of questions to try to get his insights on chemical information retrieval. And we also have a few questions for you, the audience, that will appear during the presentation. When a question appears, simply click the box near the appropriate answer. It is my pleasure to introduce Professor Damon Ridley as our guest speaker today. Damon was Professor of Chemistry at the University of Sydney until 2002, when he left to become head of the Chemistry Department at Silverbrook Research, which then was Australia's largest privately owned research organization. He has published over 150 scientific papers and is an inventor named in over 50 patents granted by the U.S. Patent Office. However, he also is very well known internationally for his work and publications in scientific information retrieval. Damon, welcome to the webinar, and thank you so much for coming to talk to us today. Damon, what started your interest in Reaxys?
Chris, thanks for your introduction, and many thanks for inviting me to participate in this webinar. And many thanks to all of you who have joined this session. To answer your question about my interest in Reaxys, I go back to when I joined the staff at the School of Chemistry at the University of Sydney over 40 years ago. In my office there was a complete set of the Beilstein volumes. While I know that Reaxys now has progressed enormously, it is relevant to say that some of its origins were founded through the classic information products such as Beilstein. Then when I went to the Chemical Abstract Service in 1988, I co-authored the first STN workshop on Beilstein. And around that time, I wrote an article about Beilstein on STN. It was called Beilstein, My Favorite File. So I guess in a way, I've always been interested in Reaxys.
You mentioned CAS and STN, but you are probably better known for your work on SciFinder. Isn't that right?
I could tell you many stories about SciFinder and about my involvement with it. Indeed, I have very fond memories of travelling to many parts of the world, of meeting fellow scientists, of working with colleagues at CAS, and of describing the features and functions of SciFinder. I think SciFinder is a wonderful information tool, and that would be clear to anyone who has read my books or who has heard me talk about SciFinder. However, I have not been involved with SciFinder for over 2 years, and partly because of this I am not qualified to talk about SciFinder now. On the other hand, I've been fortunate recently to have had the opportunity to look at Reaxys, and today I shall talk about one aspect of Reaxys, that is on searching for information on chemical reactions.
Can you outline for us the challenges associated with searching for information on reactions?
I have summarized some of the issues on this slide, and I'll let attendees look over the details. Basically, reactions are described in many ways by authors. There are many issues for database producers, and there are many issues for searchers. Indeed, I think that constructing reaction databases is very difficult, and that searching for chemical reactions is one of the hardest challenges that searchers face. However, before we go further, let's remember that the initial description of the reaction is mainly in a journal article or in a patent document. Document analysts at Reaxys extract reaction information from these sources. Some of the information is entered in the title and abstract fields in bibliographic databases, and sometimes it can be very useful to search for chemical reaction information in these fields. Document analysts then look for the substances on which reactions are reported, and this information may be put into substance databases. Finally, document analysts look at the reactions themselves, and these are entered into reaction database. The challenge for the searcher then is to find the required information in these different databases.
You mentioned bibliographic databases and substance databases and reaction databases. Can you describe the differences between them?
Okay, let me explain. The bibliographic database is one in which each individual record is for a single individual article, and here is an example. Information on reactions may be found in many parts of a bibliographic record. For example, I start to get interested when I see Reaxys terms such as Eschenmoser sulfide contraction, but more on that later. A substance database is one in which each individual record is for a single substance, and here is an example. From this record, we can easily go to all references and other information, including on preparations and reactions, to the substance. A reaction database is one in which each individual record is for a single reaction. Here is an example. From this record, we see the various conditions under which the reaction is done in different original documents. Reaxys has a true reaction database, and this is helpful because you can easily compare the different reagents, yields and conditions reported by different scientists.
So if I have a choice of searching for reactions in different databases, then how do I know which one to use and when to use it?
Well, the most important thing is to know the options and then to try a few of them. With experience and assuming we understand the database content and search options, we generally know which one to try first. I have often referred to the searching experience as being similar to the laboratory experience, and I found this nice cartoon from a school in South Australia. It tells Year 8 students, say 13-year-olds, that there are things we need to know before we go into the laboratory. I think the same applies to searches, when it certainly helps if we know a reasonable amount about the database before we attempt to search it.
Okay, let's take an example. Say we want to search for the preparation of Ritalin. How would you approach that?
As I have said, the first thing is to know our options. Shown here is the reactions form, and our main search options are Ask Reaxys, which I call an intelligent Google-like experience, the reactions form, which allows structure searches and searches through reaction querylets, I shall explain them soon. Searches through the reactions form give reactions as answers. The substances form, which allows structure searches and gives substances as answers. From substance records, we can find information on reactions for that substance. The literature form, which allows reaction information to be searched by keywords and topics, and gives bibliographic citations as answers. And Reaxys tree, which is a way to browse through hierarchies of reactions and then to use this knowledge to search. We may also search reaction data querylets, which provide many other options for searching for reactions. Chris, I'd be very interested to know what option attendees would choose at this stage, so I wonder whether you could ask them.
Thank you, Damon. Here is your first question. Which initial option would you choose to search for preparations of Ritalin? Please click the screen to answer, and you have 5 seconds to answer. Okay, thank you. Damon, now I'm curious to know, what would your choice have been?
To find preparations for Ritalin, then without any doubt, my choice is Ask Reaxys.
And why would you choose Ask Reaxys?
Essentially because I know a little about my options. Thus, I know that Ritalin is a reasonably common name for a substance, and I'd be reasonably confident that Ask Reaxys would recognize the name. I also know that Ask Reaxys is quite an intelligent function, so I'd guess it would understand what I meant by preparation. So I would enter preparation of Ritalin and I would click Go. Remember, this is my first and only click. Within a couple of seconds, this is what I see. Ask Reaxys immediately has given us reaction answers. Yes, I could have come to the same place by drawing structures and so forth. It's just that I came to where I wanted to be so much more easily and more quickly. I don't have time to go into all of the choices I now have from this screen, but I want to point out that the answers are shown by default by Reaxys ranking. That is, Reaxys has gone through all the answers and examined them for issues such as yield, number of steps, availability of starting materials and so forth, and then gives us the highest ranked answers first. That's helpful.
Damon, right now we are looking at one-step reactions. How would we display a complete synthesis?
Reaxys invented the synthesis planner for this purpose. I know other systems have subsequently adopted the concept, and you may be familiar with it, so I'll be brief. A chemist draws a reaction sequence in this way, that is, going from A through B to the product C. However, Synthesis Planner works the other way. If we wish to find how to prepare C, we click the Synthesize link under the structure. Reaxys presents us with a few separate routes, and these are numbered Synthesis 1, Synthesis 2, and so forth. We look through the alternatives and choose the ones we prefer. Let's say that we like Synthesis 2, which we note starts from B2. We then click Synthesize under B2 and find how it is prepared. We may repeat the process further back if we wish, and through this process Reaxys gives a number of prompts to indicate how we perform other operations. So this is what it looks like in the case of finding a complete synthesis to Ritalin. Here we see Ritalin is prepared by selective reduction of the pyridine ring. We click on the Synthesize link under the starting material, in which case Reaxys gives us a few options. Often we choose by autoplan, in which Reaxys looks through preparations of the substance and then gives us answers that have best yields and so forth. In this case, Reaxys gives 3 routes, and in Synthesis 1 we find the ester is made from the nitrile. At this stage we could click Details, in which case Reaxys gives information including on the reaction conditions and yields. Next we click Synthesize under the nitrile, and we learn how to prepare the nitrile. Now we see the advantage of the fact that Reaxys has a true reaction database, since for each of the reactions we see the details related to this reaction in different original documents. So here is a summary of what we did. First we searched preparation of Ritalin in Ask Reaxys. We immediately obtained reactions as answers. Finally we used Synthesis Planner and obtained a full synthetic sequence with details for each reaction. So easy, quick, and Ask Reaxys gave me exactly what I wanted. So that's why, Chris, I would try Ask Reaxys first for such a question. Now over to you for the next poll.
Okay, you have 5 seconds to answer the next question. And the question is, if you are a Reaxys user, would you now consider Ask Reaxys to find how to prepare Ritalin? Okay, thank you. Damon, you described Ask Reaxys as being an intelligent, Google-like experience. How would you do this search in Google?
I know there are several different searches I could do, but when I Google preparation of Ritalin, I get over 1 million records, and the first few are shown here. One of the answers in the top few Google answers actually appears in the Reaxys set. But remember that we obtained over 150 answers in Reaxys. I don't know how many of these would be in this Google search, but I would suspect not many would be, at least in the first bunch of pages. I mentioned that I call Ask Reaxys an intelligent Google-like experience, and I think this is illustrated by the fact that Ask Reaxys immediately gave us actual preparations and not just references to them. However, there is a little more to all this, and I shall talk about it soon.
Damon, it sounds like you're suggesting that Ask Reaxys can also be used in other ways to search for information on reactions.
Very much so, but first a note. Next to Ask Reaxys, we see a tag beta, which indicates the function is still under development and in testing. So right now, perhaps not everything we may want is functioning, but nevertheless, many things are working extremely well. Organic chemists know that the MITSUNOBU reaction is an extremely useful method to perform nucleophilic substitution reactions on alcohol. So let's ask Reaxys to give us examples of this reaction. An analysis appears within a second, and we see Ask Reaxys has interpreted our query in 3 ways, 2 as citations and 1 as reactions. Reaxys is very transparent in showing how it interprets queries, and we see this by clicking Show Query. The first interpretation is as an author, but that's not really what we want in this case. The second interpretation is as a reaction. Lastly, Ask Reaxys has asked us to consider a keyword search for the words MITSUNOBU and reaction. Let's search the second option, that is for reactions. Ask Reaxys has immediately taken us to over 17,000 actual MITSUNOBU reactions. Again, the default is to sort answers by Reaxys ranking, but there are other sort options as shown here. From here, we could explore ways to narrow these answers using Filter By on the left or Analysis View at the top. There are over 200 options, all of which are intuitive and very easy to use, but I don't have time to go into them now. Perhaps to finish, what happens when we ask Reaxys about the mechanism of the MITSUNOBU reaction? Well, Ask Reaxys automatically performs a citation search and gives any chemist plenty of very specific answers to consider. That's all the time I have for Ask Reaxys, but in my opinion this is a highly original function and I do not think there is anything like it in other products. Besides being important for searching reactions, it perhaps is even more impressive when we want to search for properties, and it soon will be enhanced to provide direct answers for bioactivities and additional information of that type of importance to synthetic medicinal chemists. It's not perfect yet, but it's very good already. Finally, I have another question for attendees, and it is shown on this slide.
Okay, you may click more than one answer this time. And the question is, how do you feel about Ask Reaxys? You have 15 seconds, starting now. Damon, getting back to our search options. The second search option you mentioned was the reactions form and reaction querylets. Can you describe the reactions form first?
I refer to the icon labelled reactions as the reactions form. It has 2 parts, and the first part is where you draw structure diagrams. I think most attendees would be familiar with the workflow for building reaction structure diagrams, and so I won't go into this other than to say that you can easily draw structures, map atoms, specify bonds taking part in the reaction, and so forth. If you have a very general reaction structure query, it may be quicker to try a similarity search, where Reaxys looks at reactions based on the groups taking part in the reaction. For a search like this, that is, if we want to find reactions where a carboxylic acid is converted to a trifluoromethyl group, a similarity search gives a table of similarities within a second. The groups near through widest effectively contain substructures of the specific query, and, for example, if we choose near, we get answers that look like this. These answers look pretty good to me, and again you'll note that all the different references and the different reaction yields and conditions are in the single reaction identifier. The other point to mention at this stage is that we can search for stereochemical features in reaction diagrams. A stereochemical query like this, in which I have specified bonds to be formed and broken, and I've asked for some bonds to be in chains, gives answers like those shown here.
The other part of the reactions form are the reaction querylets. Do you have suggestions for using these in searching for chemical reaction information?
When we first enter Reaxys, and after we click the reactions form, we see the default reaction data querylets at the bottom of the screen. However, we can easily change these through the Add Remove Fields link on the bottom right. The available querylets for reactions are shown on this slide. Some of them, such as fields that relate to reactants, products, yields, time, temperature and so forth, are easy to interpret. Others may be unfamiliar to some of you, and I'll talk about two: reaction type and subject studied. Here is what the screen looks like if we remove all the default querylets and enter just these two querylets. Each of the querylets has three parts to consider. First, we enter our terms in the middle box. Second, if we click the up-down arrows, we see four choices. Is means exactly as we have entered. We can enter an asterisk as a truncation symbol to the left and or right of our term, so is very flexible. In the other options, truncation terms are added automatically for us. So, for example, contains automatically adds left and right truncation to our term. Chris, I would like to know how familiar attendees are with querylets. So I'd like you to ask a few questions at this stage, and over to you.
Here are three statements on the screen. Please select the ones that apply to you. You have 10 seconds to answer, starting now. And back over to you, Damon.
But the question is, how do we know what to enter? Well, we either just start typing in the main box and soon auto-suggest or drop-down suggestions are displayed. We'd be familiar with this through search engines like Google. Or we can click the lookup link, and as we type, some actual entries appear. In this case, as soon as we click Lookup in the Subject Studied querylet, we actually see all the entries in this field. We can immediately find specific information on reactions, such as equilibrium constants, mechanisms, or quantum yield for photochemical reactions. As an example, however, let's look for kinetics of reactions that involve conversion of benzylic halides to benzylic alcohols or ethers. Such a search may be of particular interest to undergraduate or postgraduate chemists and to those who teach them. So we draw the reaction and we enter kinetics, which we have identified in the previous slide, in the subject studied querylet. Finally, we click Search Reactions. Reaxys gives almost 500 reactions, but oops, some of these involve reactions of benzoyl chlorides. Such answers certainly match the query. Well, I just didn't think about that. But of course, this gives me an opportunity to show one way you can narrow answers in Reaxys. We can do a number of things, and here I choose to narrow the answers by a substructure search, and specifically to exclude benzoyl halides in starting materials. That is, I click Substructure, then draw the structure required, and click Exclude. Now we have a great set of answers, and we see from the highlighting that the search was possible because a particular feature of the reaction was to study reaction kinetics, and this information was included in the reaction details which is searchable in the subject-studied QUERYLET. So in summary, there are a few options in the subject-studied QUERYLET, and they help narrow answers to a number of specific types of studies.
The ability to search querylets in conjunction with other fields, like structure search fields, clearly is interesting. Now, you mentioned that other querylets may be useful for searching for chemical reaction information. Can you give an example?
Yes, however, first I make the comment that synthetic chemists always have used a number of different resources. I'm thinking here of things like the monographic series Organic Reactions and Organic Syntheses, and compendiums such as Hoob and Weil. I also found monographs such as Named Organic Reactions useful, and this particularly was the case when I was a student and learning about organic reactions. The point is that, at times, we need to search for chemical reaction information through ways that do not include structure diagrams. One of these ways is very well covered by searching in the reaction type QUERYLET. That covers types of reactions and named reactions. I haven't counted up the number of topics in the field in Reaxys, but as a guess I would say it's between 1,000 and 2,000. That's a lot of topics for a research chemist, a teacher, or a student. Let's take an example, specifically that of hetero Diels-Alder cyclizations. I don't have time to go into the many reasons why a synthetic chemist would want to search these types of reactions, nor of the complications of attempting to search by structure diagrams. Let's just say I've had a long interest in hetero Diels-Alder cyclizations, and I thought I'd use this as an example. Unfortunately, I encountered a few problems with this actual search in Reaxys. But in the 30 years that I've been involved in talking about information retrieval, I have always tried to pick real examples and to face any issues that may arise. So let me share my experience in searching for hetero Diels-Alder cyclizations with you. The only thing that we need to know in advance is that there are a very large number of reaction types in the reaction type QUERYLET, and that we can get help on what terms to use by clicking Lookup in the QUERYLET. So we click Lookup and we start typing hetero space Diels. Auto-suggestions soon appear, and we note that there are a large number of relevant listings. Now we see a possible problem, namely that there are a number of listings with hetero space Diels and hetero hyphen Diels. The inconsistency is unfortunate, but that's the reality. And I would have to say that I'd much rather know about the problem, that is, for the search engine to be transparent, than not to know. In fact, the transparency of Reaxys is, to me, a real plus. So what's the solution? In fact, there are two solutions. First, we can, in turn, highlight entries and then click Transfer. Reaxys takes all these terms, together with others that it may have identified, and puts them into the search box. Alternatively, in Reaxys we can apply truncation at the left, right, or middle of terms. We then click Search Reactions. In this case, Reaxys gives us a very large number of hetero Diels-Alder cyclizations. So we easily got through the problem, and the outcome is that we obtained an excellent answer set. An important point here is that we did not have to rely on any structure search, and we did not have to apply any refinement by any structure-related search term. As I mentioned at the outset, this would be quite difficult to achieve anyway because of the variety of structures in which we may be interested. Instead, we obtained quite a comprehensive set of answers that we can then investigate further through post-processing tools in Reaxys.
Earlier on, you mentioned that there are 5 main ways to find information on chemical reactions in Reaxys. And to refresh everyone's memory, here they are displayed on the screen. So we've looked at the first 2, and I guess the opportunities from the substances form mainly relate to the different ways to find substances. Is that right?
Yes, that's part of it. For example, if we use a structure query for Ritalin as the starting point, we can find all substances with this exact structure. From the answers, we may either find all the preparations and all the reactions of all the substances, or we may find preparations and reactions for single substances. It's important to know that Reaxys has many unique ways to find substances, for example through part names and part formulas, and this includes specific ways to find substances like radical, carbocation and carbanion intermediates in reactions. The different ways to find substances, however, are outside the scope of this webinar.
You said finding substances was only part of the story. What's the other part?
The other point is that information on reactions may also be searched directly in substance records, and I shall show as an example one way to find catalysts for the Suzuki reaction. I have already mentioned that it's easy to add or remove querylets, and here is how we actually do it. First we click Add Remove Fields, and we obtain the screen shown. There are over 500 fields, so how do we find the one of interest? A simple way is to type in the Find Any Property box, and since we're interested in catalysts, we start typing the word catalyst. We see our options and we see type of reaction. Note it is a field for catalysts. We highlight the type of reaction. Next we click Add and then Save. This field, remember, relates to catalysts, now appears as a querylet, and since we are interested in catalysts for Suzuki reactions, we enter Suzuki. Finally, we click Search Substances. We find almost 350 substances that have been used as catalysts for Suzuki reactions, and you will note that the hit data gives just that part of the substance record that relates to the Suzuki reaction.
Well, we have two options left, literature forms and the Reaxys tree. Which would you like to look at first?
Let's look at the literature forms first. I mentioned at the outset that there was a large amount of information on chemical reactions in the title, abstract and keyword fields, and one way to search in these fields is to use the Citation Basic Index querylet. Here we are searching keywords and we have at our disposal all the truncation and proximity operators that we need. We don't rely on some algorithms, instead we control our searches. Here are the first few answers, which you note are sorted by relevance. Remember that we are now searching almost 50 million records. We are also searching keywords from a number of specialized databases, including the Reaxys, Embase and Compendex databases. Additionally, all the keywords from these different sources are within the same record. We can, of course, use the Reaxys post-processing tools, Filter By and Analysis View, to narrow these records in systematic ways, but again, I don't have time to go into these now. Ask Reaxys also performs citation searches, and you would have gathered by now that I'm very interested in Ask Reaxys, so I thought I'd compare these answers from the Citation Basic Index querylet with what I would get from Ask Reaxys. I cannot use truncation in Ask Reaxys, so I just limited my first question to phase transfer catalysis. I clicked Go, and I obtained the Ask Reaxys analysis. I found it interesting that reactions and citations were identified. Yes, after all, catalysis is a feature of reactions. When I tried phase transfer catalysts, then substances and citations were identified. Yes, a catalyst is a feature of substances. For Ask Reaxys to pick up this subtle point is impressive, well, at least to me. And finally, just for fun, I show here the results of a citation search in the first case. My conclusion: I remain a fan of Ask Reaxys, although I'm also aware that for those who want to go beyond the intelligent Google-like experience, have other options to explore.
Well, we've seen quite a bit so far on this whistle-stop tour. Is that a term used by Australians as well?
It certainly is, although in Australia there are big distances between cities, and so it would be mainly whistling with little stopping.
Yes, that's true. I hadn't thought of it that way. But still, I guess we have one more stop, right?
Yes, I think we just have time for a few comments about Reaxys tree. At the moment, Reaxys tree has 4 hierarchies, and you see that one of them is dedicated to chemical transformations. That's what chemical reactions are all about, right? Once again, we may find any term, in which case Reaxys takes us to that part of the hierarchy. So here we go, whistle stop. Enter MITSUNOBU, click search. Reaxys finds the part of the hierarchy, click search literature, and we get over 1,000 references. Quick, easy, we immediately get precise answers. However, if we don't know what we are looking for, we may expand the hierarchy, and here we note there are 3 branches to chemical reaction class, named reaction, reaction kinetic. I'm now going to take us down a biochemical path because I want to make the point that the information in Reaxys tree is vast. Yes, we can easily search for MITSUNOBU reactions and Eschen-Moses sulfide contractions and so forth. However, we also can find lots of other topics. Let's expand chemical reaction class. Here are some expansions of the chemical reaction class. There are hundreds of systematic terms, and here I've only shown the first few. Let's choose one of them, catalyzed reaction. Now we see a large number of different types of catalyzed reactions. If we are interested in dehydrogenase reactions, we click the box, and Reaxys gives us references to records in the bibliographic database that have been indexed with the term dehydrogenase reaction. So in summary, Reaxys tree gives hierarchies of terms that we may browse and then search.
And did you compare it with Ask Reaxys?
Yes, indeed. I entered the search and Ask Reaxys found the substance, dehydrogenase, the reactions that contain the index term, and the citations. The second option gave a number of specific reactions that we can narrow further in a number of ways.
Damon, you have shown us 5 main options for searching for chemical reaction information in Reaxys. Do you have suggestions regarding which ones to use and when to use them?
Chris, that's a really tough question to answer. It depends particularly on the actual search and on the user's expectations. However, let's go back and review what we have done. Here I have summarized the 5 main options and the searches I have demonstrated. When I now consider the 6 searches through Ask Reaxys, my comment is that all were very easy to do and the answers generally met my expectations very well. In most cases, I could choose between getting citations on the one hand and substances, reaction or preparation information on the other hand. And I found that immediate retrieval of the latter types of information helped considerably. So as a general comment, I would try Ask Reaxys first, and I would think carefully about options in the analysis table. Remember, Ask Reaxys is in development, so if the first search does not meet your needs, then try something a little different. So try it, and if you like, please share your experiences with us. You can easily do this through the customer support link at the bottom of the main search page. We did 4 searches through the reactions form. Clearly, if you want to convert one substance to another, then the best way is to do a reaction search by structure or part structures. But don't forget, there are over 20 reaction querylets. My favourite reaction querylets are subject studied and reaction type, since these provide unique ways to get reaction information by searches that do not involve structures. Remember, you can get a lot of reaction information through substance records, and the key is to find substances in the first place. When you sign off today, you will be asked a few questions, and one of them is whether you would be interested in a webinar on the different ways to search for substances. Please let us know. In the literature form, the main option to consider is the Citation Basic Index QUERYLET. This QUERYLET searches more or less the same data as Ask Reaxys citation searches, but the difference is that in the QUERYLET you can use truncation and proximity operators. These tools may help to expand your keyword search. Finally, there are thousands of options within Reaxys tree, and the key here is either to search for a term in the Find Any Term box or browse through the relevant hierarchy. Depending upon the query, you may get slightly different answers through the different methods. For example, a citation search on MITSUNOBU reactions in Ask Reaxys or in Reaxys tree gives slightly different results, but that's good, and just try them. When you are working with QUERYLETS, take note of the options under Lookup or the options that are shown through Auto-Suggest, since these will help you choose relevant terms. Overall, you have lots of opportunities, so experiment with them, and soon you'll find the best strategies to find information on the different types of queries that you have. And finally, Chris, I have a request. I hope attendees have found this whistle-stop tour on searching for information on chemical reactions on Reaxys interesting. I hope I've shown you that in this area, Reaxys provides unique opportunities. I've shown a few, but I'd be very interested to hear from attendees of some of the innovative searches that they have used. So please get in touch with me, and here is the email address. You can also use this email to tell us more about this webinar, to tell us about your experiences with Ask Reaxys, and to obtain additional information on this session.
Damon, thank you very much for your time and for your insights today. That was quite informative. And thank you everyone for participating in today's webinar. When you log off, you will be asked a couple of questions. They should take less than a minute to complete, and I very much look forward to your answers. Look for the link to the recorded webinar in a follow-up email. And don't forget to send your innovative searches to Damon at bdtraining@elsevier.com. And if you have any other comments, please send them to that email address as well. Thank you again. Goodbye.